Arteta's Arsenal have a new style of play, and it's scary because this isn't just another good run of form. This is different. 3 games without a win in the league. A draining draw against Liverpool. Dropped points against Nottingham Forest, where Arsenal dominated territory but lacked incision. And then the painful one, a defeat to Manchester United that sparked real doubt. Suddenly the questions were unavoidable. Had Arteta's control-heavy football become too rigid, too structured to express itself when it mattered most? What followed changed everything.
Wow. What a goal. It is a beautiful goal. Wow. Who scored it? It is the man we spoke to a few weeks ago on this very programme. What
a goal by Jesus.
A ruthless 4-0 win away at Leeds. An XG gap of 2.39 to 0.15. 4 goals, 12 corners, 8 shots on target. A 7-point lead restored at the top of the table. Bukayo Saka injured in the warm-up. Noni Madueke steps in and bends the game. Martinelli switches to the right, and Viktor Gyökeres scores from the kind of service he was accused of never receiving. Havertz returns, and suddenly Arsenal's attack starts breathing again. This isn't the Arsenal we saw earlier in the season. It's freer, more expressive, and far harder to stop. So what exactly did Arteta change after that Manchester United loss? How did structure turn into freedom without losing control? And why might this be the most dangerous version of Arsenal yet? This is why this Arsenal isn't just winning again. They're evolving into something genuinely terrifying. There are moments in a season that don't just cost points, they force reflection. For Arsenal, that moment arrived in the 3-2 defeat to Manchester United. Not because the performance collapsed, but because it exposed something deeper. Arsenal had control, they had territory, they had long spells where the game looked exactly how Mikel Arteta wants it played, and yet they lost. That contradiction is what triggered the noise. In the immediate aftermath, the reaction was telling. The criticism wasn't about effort or intensity, it was about expression. Pundits, analysts, and even sections of the fan base began asking the same uncomfortable question. Had Arteta's Arsenal become too safe? At that point in the season, Arsenal were coming off a 3-game winless run in the Premier League. The margins were tightening at the top of the table, and suddenly the control-heavy model, once praised for its maturity, was being framed as rigid, too rehearsed, too predictable in the final third. Psychologically, the United loss mattered because it challenged belief. Arsenal dominated possession phases, but decisive moments went the other way. A single error was punished, transitional moments became costly, and crucially, Arsenal didn't look capable of breaking the game open once momentum shifted. Tactically, it mattered even more. Zoom out, and a pattern had been forming earlier in the season. Arsenal often won the territory battle, pinning opponents back, circulating possession efficiently, and limiting shots conceded. But the attacking output didn't always reflect that dominance. The numbers told a subtle story. High possession shares, strong territorial control, but inconsistent goal returns relative to game control. The issue wasn't chance creation in isolation, it was how those chances arrived. Arsenal's attacking structure had become heavily choreographed. Wide players often received the ball in predictable zones. Central lanes were crowded. Build-up was clean, but final third actions lacked spontaneity. Attacks stalled into recycled possession rather than accelerating toward goal. This is where the criticism around Viktor Gyökeres began to surface, not as an accusation, but as a symptom. The narrative quickly became, is he getting enough service? And more specifically, why does so much of Arsenal's attacking play die before the ball reaches him? It wasn't about Gyökeres missing chances, it was about how rarely Arsenal created chaos around him. Wide service became inconsistent, crosses arrived late or from deep. The striker was often surrounded rather than supplied. Arsenal were controlling games, but not always unsettling opponents. Here's the crucial part. Arteta didn't abandon his principles after Manchester United. He didn't chase chaos. He didn't tear up the system. He reassessed it. The United defeat forced a recalibration. How to keep control without suffocating. Expression. How to preserve structure while reintroducing freedom. How to make Arsenal unpredictable again. Not reckless, but alive. That questioning moment became the foundation for what followed. Because the problem was now clearly defined. Arsenal didn't need more possession. They needed more imagination within it. And once that clicked, everything else, the rotations, the roles, the service, the goals, began to change. That evolution is where this story really begins. On paper, Arsenal are still recognizable. Arsenal, a 3-2-5 in possession, morphing from a 4-3-3 out of possession. One fullback steps inside, the other holds width. Two midfielders anchor circulation, 5 attackers occupy the final line. But the difference now is behavioural, not cosmetic. Ball circulation is faster, not just side to side, but forward earlier. Arsenal are accessing vertical lanes sooner instead of waiting for the perfect positional picture. First-time passes between the lines have increased. The ball is travelling through opponents, not just around them. In recent matches, this has shown up clearly. Higher shot volume from central zones, increased touches inside the opposition box, a healthier balance between cutbacks, crosses and through balls, XG growth that reflects chance quality, not just quantity. Arsenal are no longer building attacks purely to maintain control. They are building them to disrupt defensive shape. Earlier in the season, Arsenal's wide and half-space occupation became predictable. Wingers hugged touchlines, midfielders arrived on schedule, opponents could set their block early and hold it. Now rotations are constant. Wide players drift inside earlier. Midfielders pull wide temporarily. Fullbacks underlap instead of overlapping by default. The result is positional ambiguity. Defenders are forced to make decisions rather than follow patterns. This is what expressive actually means in Arteta's context. Players still respect zones, but they are no longer trapped by them. Final third positioning is less static. Arsenal are creating moments of overload and isolation dynamically, not pre-programmed. This evolution was especially clear in Arsenal's most recent Champions League outing. Against elite opposition, the Gunners maintained their usual control metrics: possession dominance, compact rest defense, but paired it with earlier vertical access. Instead of recycling wide to wide, Arsenal repeatedly punched passes into the half spaces. Attacks ended with shots, not resets. Defensive lines were stretched horizontally and vertically, which reduced counter-press recovery distances and kept pressure sustained. The key takeaway wasn't just that Arsenal controlled the game, it was that they accelerated it at will. And that's where personnel becomes decisive. Structure alone doesn't unlock expression, profiles do. The return of Kai Havertz has been central to this shift, not because he dominates the ball, but because he connects phases. In build-up, Havertz provides a vertical reference point between midfield and attack. He receives on the half-turn, draws pressure, and releases runners quickly. This shortens the distance between Arsenal's control phase and their chance creation phase. Out of possession, his pressing intelligence matters just as much. He closes passing lanes rather than chasing the ball, allowing Arsenal to lock teams in higher zones and recover possession. Crucially, Havertz occupies defenders without demanding the ball. That subtle movement creates space for others to thrive. With Havertz active between the lines, Viktor Gyökeres is no longer isolated against centre-backs. Defenders are forced to choose, step out to Havertz or hold their line. That hesitation is where service improves. Wide players benefit too. They receive the ball with defenders already destabilised, not set. Crosses arrive earlier, cutbacks find runners rather than crowds. And then there's Gabriel Jesus. His movement complements Havertz perfectly, drifting, dropping, dragging markers. Where Havertz connects play vertically, Jesus disrupts it laterally. Together, they restore unpredictability to Arsenal's front line. Even Martin Odegaard gains freedom. With less responsibility to force progression alone, his creativity becomes more selective and more dangerous. Arsenal didn't need a new formation, they needed better expression within the same one. By reintroducing verticality, embracing rotation, and reintegrating the right profiles, Arteta has unlocked a version of Arsenal that can control games and finish them. The system is still there, but now it breathes. And when a control team learns how to express itself without losing balance, that's when it becomes genuinely frightening. Sometimes genuine evolution reveals itself not through grand tactical redesigns or revolutionary systems, but in small, decisive moments that show how far a manager has really come. Arsenal's trip to Elland Road offered exactly one of those moments, and it said more about Mikel Arteta's growth as a coach than any passionate touchline speech or post-match interview ever could. The problem arrived before a single ball was even kicked. Bukayo Saka pulled up injured during the warm-up, a genuine blow, and not just because of his obvious output and quality, but because of what he represents in Arsenal's entire attacking structure: right-sided certainty, reliability, a known quantity. The immediate replacement was Noni Madueke, who came straight in on that right side and delivered an excellent first-half performance, creating assists, whipping in dangerous deliveries, applying constant pressure, exactly what you'd hope for from someone thrust thrust into the lineup at the last second. But the real tactical wrinkle, the moment that showed Arteta's evolution, arrived later in the match. Arteta didn't simply try to manage the game out and protect what they had. He actively changed the entire picture. Midway through the second half, Gabriel Martinelli was introduced as a substitute, but not on his familiar, comfortable left flank where he's spent most of his Arsenal career. On the right wing instead. This wasn't just a cosmetic swap to get fresh legs on, it was a calculated disruption of Leeds' entire defensive references and patterns. Up to that point in the match, Leeds had settled into fairly predictable, comfortable defensive responses. Show Arsenal wide toward the touchline. Protect the dangerous central lane at all costs. Compress the penalty box early when crosses come in. Martinelli's introduction flipped that entire defensive logic on its head. Unlike a traditional right-footed winger who holds width and tries to get crosses in from the touchline, Martinelli attacked. Inside out from that right side. He ran directly, aggressively at defenders, forcing them to turn and twist their bodies rather than just shuffle across comfortably. That single positional change completely destabilized Leeds' backline in ways they clearly weren't prepared for. The third goal, Viktor Gyökeres' clinical finish, became the clearest, most visible expression of Arteta's new adaptability and willingness to adjust. The entire sequence matters when you break it down. Martin Odegaard receives the ball intelligently between the lines, completely unpressured. Martinelli accelerates explosively past his marker on the right side, crucially not hugging the touchline but attacking the dangerous channel between fullback and centre-back. The cross arrives early, whipped in before the defence can possibly reset and get organised. Gyökeres, no longer static or crowded by multiple defenders, finishes clinically from close range. This wasn't random coincidence or fortunate luck. It was deliberate problem-solving happening in real time during a match. Earlier in the season, Arsenal might have stuck somewhat rigidly to their established left-sided creation patterns, hoping repetition would eventually break teams down. Here, Arteta identified where the exploitable space actually was and attacked it immediately without hesitation. That single tactical action also directly addressed a season-long narrative that had been building, the persistent idea that Gyökeres doesn't get proper service from the right side. On this particular occasion, the right side delivered decisively and created the goal, specifically because Arteta changed the profile of who was operating in that zone. This wasn't improvisation just for the sake of being unpredictable or clever. It was controlled flexibility within a solid framework. The overall structure stayed fundamentally intact, the zonal responsibilities stayed clearly respected, but crucially, the player profiles within those specific zones changed, and that changed everything about how Leeds had to defend. Arteta is clearly no longer waiting patiently for his established patterns to eventually work through sheer repetition. He's actively engineering tactical solutions mid-game, reading what's happening and responding decisively. And that responsiveness, that confidence to adjust and adapt on the fly, is the clearest sign yet of a coach who's genuinely confident in his system, confident enough that he can bend it, twist it, and reshape it without it breaking. That's not just tactical flexibility, that's mastery. And it's exactly why this version of Arsenal feels different, more complete, more dangerous than anything we've seen before. To understand why this evolution is genuinely real, you don't need tactical theories or complex analysis. You just need to look at the numbers. And the numbers from that Leeds match, they're absolutely overwhelming. At Elland Road, Arsenal weren't just dominant in some vague statistical way. They were clinically, ruthlessly decisive. Expected goals 2.39 for Arsenal versus a tiny 0.15 for Leeds. Total shots 14-3, shots on target 8-1, corners won 12-4. Big chances created, 2-0. That's not passive possession for possession's sake, that's sustained territorial pressure converted into actual punishment. Earlier in the season, we'd seen Arsenal produce similar territorial dominance that sometimes ended frustratingly with narrow margins or drop points. But here, it ended with 4 convincing goals coming from completely different zones through entirely different routes. This is exactly where the transformation becomes undeniable and impossible to dismiss. How they scored tells the whole story. Arsenal's 4 goals came through. A perfectly delivered set piece, a forced error created by relentless pressure, a dangerous wide cross from open play, a slick central combination finished clinically inside the box. That spread genuinely matters tactically. Opponents can't simply identify one dangerous pattern and block that single lane anymore. Arsenal now threaten you through the middle, from both flanks, early in attacking phases, and late when defences are stretched. Defensive preparation becomes exponentially harder when attacking patterns aren't predictably locked into one rigid rhythm. Balanced expression, not chaos. What makes this evolved version of Arsenal so dangerous isn't chaos or abandoning everything Arteta built. It's balanced expression within a controlled framework. They still fundamentally control games the way they always have. Possession remains stable and high. Rest defense stays compact and organized. Counter-pressing remains aggressive and coordinated. But now, and this is the crucial difference, they accelerate decisively when the right moment appears. Attacks no longer frustratingly stall into sideways resets. They end in genuine shots, dangerous rebounds, and sustained second-phase pressure that keeps opponents pinned. That's exactly why the Leeds win wasn't some random anomaly or lucky performance. It was confirmation of real evolution. This team hasn't lost its core identity or abandoned what made them successful. It has expanded it, made it more complete. The missing pieces returned. The return of Kai Havertz and the renewed sharpness of Gabriel Jesus have given the entire system its missing connectors. Not headline makers in isolation necessarily, but players who genuinely unlock everyone around them. Havertz intelligently links different phases and occupies defenders with his movement. Jesus disrupts defensive structure with perfectly timed runs and positioning. Viktor Gyökeres now benefits from earlier, cleaner service into dangerous areas. Martin Odegaard operates with more creative freedom and less defensive burden. Add in the tactical willingness to flip profiles, like moving Gabriel Martinelli to attack from the right side, and Arsenal suddenly have genuine answers to problems instead of just repeating the same habits, hoping for different results. This is exactly why this version of Arsenal is so much harder to stop than what came before. You can't just sit deep in a low block. They'll patiently rotate and create numerical overloads until something breaks. You can't just press them aggressively high. They'll bypass you early with quality and hurt you in transition. You can't just focus on blocking one specific flank. They'll simply change the attacking profile and punish you from the other side. Most importantly, they're now solving tactical problems within matches in real time, not just between them during the week. That adaptability is the genuine hallmark of a title-ready side. The evolution, not revolution. Arsenal didn't panic after that Manchester United defeat. They didn't tear up the entire blueprint Arteta had carefully built. They refined it, sharpened it, made it more complete. And when a team that already controls matches at an elite level suddenly learns how to express itself freely, with tactical flexibility, growing confidence, and genuine conviction, it stops being just another contender in the race. It becomes the standard everyone else is desperately chasing. This isn't Arsenal peaking too early in the season and risking burnout. This is Arsenal systematically figuring out how to hurt teams in every possible way. Arteta's Arsenal can still suffocate you with possession and control when needed, but now they can also strike unpredictably, adjust on the fly mid-match, and punish teams before they've even properly settled into their defensive shape. When a control-obsessed team learns how to express itself without losing that fundamental balance, it stops being merely impressive. It becomes genuinely terrifying. And right now, that's exactly what Arsenal have become.